If you want to work big, slab work is something that will really get you there. But to start off, we're going to start with a really simple project and show you how to get it smooth, flat, and once you've got that under your belt, the sky's the limit. So first I'm going to cut off some clay. You want to cut it thicker than you need it so that you can roll it down and get it all nice and even. Today I'm going to use the 8mm dials because they're a little bit more forgiving for the beginners. So to roll evenly I'm going to use these 8mm rods because they're the thickness I want. So when I place it next to the clay, I can't go any thinner than that as long as I stay on the rods. We start rolling in the middle just because we're lazy and we don't want to roll the clay all the way from one side to the other. And what I've done is I've planned out the thickness so that I can now cut the pieces out nice and efficiently. So I'm turning it over often so it doesn't stick to the table, and that it is also easier to roll when you pick it up. And when I'm picking it up, I'm keeping my hands there so I don't dimple the clay. So this is the plan we've got. We want to join it up so we can we've made the base a little bit bigger, and basically we're going to cut out the flat sides, and I've made some templates just to make it easier to follow with today. So next I'm going to plan out how I'm going to make my pieces. You always want to take at least 5 or 8mm off the side of your pot because you don't want all the clays there being stretched and stressed. So I'm going to use a thick piece of wood to get a straight line, but also to get my knife perpendicular to the table and get a nice straight edge. That way when I've cut, I've got like that, because you don't want to cut and get an overhang like that there, and then your pot won't join nicely. Just going to use this template to guide it out and make it a bit quicker. If you want, I find if I want it more accurate, I get a ruler out and measure as I go. It takes a bit longer, but you also want to leave the excess clay down while you're cutting. If you don't get these perfectly now, we'll show you some techniques afterwards how to tidy them up a bit. Then the base is made bigger than we need it, so I'm not going to put as much care into here because the pot always doesn't end up square, it could end up parallelogram or something, so you want a bit of extra clay, and we cut the base to suit the size of our pot. Alright, so now we've got a board ready, so we'll take the clay off. Again, try not to bend the clay, try and keep it as flat as you can as you're going. I'm going to use this polystyrene bin that I got given to me by fish department. It's airtight, so things dry slowly, and it's stackable, so when I've got a lot of pots I can put them all on top of each other. I've got a piece of paper in between and stack several boards up to 10 high. Just make sure I can get the lid on. I'll leave that for a few days and come back when it's harder. We've dried these out. They're a little bit too hard at the moment, but you see they're nice and firm. When we rolled out the clay, it wants to warp and it's really hard to get it straight. So now I just need to wet them a little bit turn them over. So we just want to soften them a little bit because they've gone a little bit overboard. So when you're wetting the clay, you want to get it so that it's solid, but that it can still flex a little bit, so that when it's joining up against something you don't get any cracks when you deform a little bit to get the joints right. Before we get started, if your clay is rolled up a bit, once you've got it soft, you can give it a gentle roll. I'm just going to turn that one over just to make sure that get them as flat as possible. Especially if you dry them quickly, they tend to warp. Then I'm just going to check my sizes. Often after a few days when you look at it you start to see some of the mistakes. So these ones here are a bit wide. I've got a rasp that we can use. And that can clean up the edges. I need a straight edge on the bottom, so if you haven't quite got your cutting straight. And that's also making sure that these two here are not quite the same size, so you can use a rasp or a knife to get them nice and even. So to plan out where I'm going to scratch, I've drawn lines and put crosses where I'm going to do my scratching. And then I've chosen a nail with a deep V to give me a deep scratch. And then we're going to go the other way and you're going to do the whole side of the pot. Don't use something thin like a knife because it just doesn't give the same deepness, so you're not going to get the slip in there later. We want something with a nice deep V that's going to let the slip in, and then we're going to go through. Doesn't have to be neat, but fairly deep. You sort of like 1 to 2 millimeters, and I typically do all the sides beforehand, so when I come to the joining I've got less thinking to do, it's all done already. So we're going to use slip as our glue. Slip is made from clay, basically it's clay with too much water. I have it really thick and smooth. We'll do a detailed video on that shortly. But what we're going to do is we want to take it, we want to fill all those scratches that we made. I use a tapping motion just to fill it in. And this sort of first one, you want a little bit, you'd rather have more slip than not enough, because if you've got too much slip it's just going to squeeze out, and if you haven't got enough you're going to have a gap, a void, or an air bubble inside. So I'm going to be working on this little board which is going to keep the bottom of my pot flat, which means it's going to fit on the base nicely, and it's also going to allow me to turn the pot around without stressing the joint. Now taking a wooden spoon, tapping the bottom and working my way up, and you should see all the slip squeezing out, and then just want to take the excess slip away just to neaten it up a bit. Now the next one we're going to do is we're going to do this side. So again, just filling in all the nice wide scratches you've got with slip, and we're going to do this one. So you want to do both sides so you fill, especially if you're going to do something like Raku, any air pockets there will expand and explode your pot. And now we're going to hold this side here just start one side and right, so we're going to support the corners and strengthen them with a coil. I've got a video on this. You want to just roll as much as you need. You can also, if you've got an extruder, you can just get thin coils from that as well. Because the clay is going to dry quite quickly, so just roll each section as you need it. Then we're going to put some slip on it. Right, so this coil, we want a generous amount of slip, which is going to be our glue. Ideally you want a little bit in the corners, that's going to get squeezed out. That makes sure you get no air pockets in there. Don't want to go overboard because then you've got more cleaning up to do. So put the coil in there. So normally I'd have it in my hands and support by both sides, but basically you don't want to squeeze out your join, because you're going to have to press fairly hard into the corner. You see as I'm going, the clay's stretching out, so I'm just going to pinch those off. And then the next trick is to smooth it out and make it follow the corner. So again, really important to support the join either side, otherwise you can put too much force in. And then just rubbing up and down and getting it to smooth out, and the hard part is getting rid of those little lines there. So now we're ready to put the base on. It just pays to check which side is your top and bottom. So the flat side you did down. We always do this base bigger than you need it, because sometimes the pot doesn't quite end up the shape you're expecting. And the other advantage is we're going to cut the feet out of there. So if you're going to cut, just using a thin knife here, and I'm just going to give myself a bit of wiggle room and cut it a bit wider than I need. And depending on your pot, it can be important to put the pot back, because sometimes your pot won't be square or rectangular. So, and then we just do like normal, we do all the scratching. Now, if I was making a bigger pot and I could get in there, I would put a coil on the bottom, but because this is quite thin and I can't get my hand out and it's a strong shape, even in the Raku firing I've never had any problems with it cracking. Okay, now making sure you get it the right way around. I'll place that down. And if you want, you can turn the pot upside down and put it down, but I'm going to hold it here. Now, whenever somebody said they tried my method and the pot cracked, most of the time what they forgot was this step of tapping the clay together, so you're allowing the clay to deform and the joints to go up, and you're squeezing all the slip out. At the moment it's not looking that great, and a lot of my students get despondent, but now we're going to show you a bit of magic and we'll turn this into a beautiful pot. So now we're going to scrape the sides down. I'm using a hacksaw blade, the serrated edges, just because they don't wear out and they're nice and flat. But if you get a serrated knife, you can get very similar effect. And obviously the closer you get your pot together, the less scraping you're going to do. And you want to do, I'm just going to go back to, you can also buy these, which are a little bit much, but better than nothing. As you can see, the hacksaw blade's got a nice thin, and you want to go fairly fast. If you go too slow, you'll go until the bumps. And what you want to do is just work it all out. So it doesn't have to be flat, but it just has to be a smooth transition from one to the other. And that way you can hide all your joins. And it's a bit of effort, but it really transforms the pot. Just to show you where we headed, if you just get a back of a spoon or a smooth rock or a glass bead, you can just go and push all those. This is a grog clay, so it's the best way to go. If you're using a smooth body clay, then you can just use a sponge and just wipe it from the side. And at this point here, you can also have a look, like this side's looking pretty good, but this side I need to scrape a little bit more back to get it looking good. Now our rim is a little bit uneven, so we're going to take the opportunity now to cut it straight. So the easiest way is to plan your cuts by using a straight edge. Right, that side's a little bit lower than I thought, we'll have to do it again. There we go, take that around there. And then what I'm going to do is take a knife and just keep it nice and level. Make sure you support the clay when you come around the corner. Just cut into your and again, if you've kept a few, oops, a little bit off there, kept a few pieces of firm clay, then you can practice this. That's looking pretty good, but we're just going to again use our scraping technique, and we're just going to take, now you get into the style choices, it's nice to just break the edges a little bit so the glaze sits on there, or you can go full on round. And get some slip. So since you last saw the pot, I spent a few minutes scraping it down, just getting the hacksaw blade or some serrated edge and just scraping it down, getting the edges nice and straight and rounded off is what I wanted for this one. And then we're going to put the spoon, just get in and smooth it out. And then I just found something smooth with a rounded edge just to get into there and just to get my final details. The edges show up, so if your clay is uneven, just scrape the top down from the inside until the edge looks the same, because nobody's going to look further down. Just showing you on this pot here with the straight edges really show up the bending in the clay. So if you put the rounded edges on like this, then that really hides some imperfections. And then you can start playing with the rounding the top, doing your favorite glazing, and then as you go you can start mixing it up and making some bigger things, getting the pattern there and here, a little bit more complicated, cutting the edges and getting it to bend around and getting some nice shapes. So if you like that, hit like and subscribe to see more videos. Please leave some comments on things you'd like to see more details of, and we'll see you next time.